Thank you, Mr. President. It's been a long debate, and I know you all want to get out of here, but I spent a lot of time preparing remarks because this bill matters. So I hope you sit around and listen to me so you know exactly what you're voting against or voting for. I heard a lot tonight, same tired, old, worn-out talking points that I've heard for the last decade that I've been in office fighting for a parent's right to direct the educational choices of their child. It's like we're just bending over and grabbing the wrinkled piece of paper out of the trash can that you used last year and opening it up and saying the same things over and over again. Well, there's a difference now. Parents are more engaged, and it's incumbent upon us to be their voice because they can't have the voice here. So I'm going to be their voice tonight, and I'm going to attempt to dispel all of these false narratives that have been placed out here tonight. Here are the facts. This is not an attack on teachers or schools. Let's be honest. Who's educating in non-public schools? I think it's teachers. This is not a bill designed to undermine public education. I and many of my colleagues on this side of the aisle have our own children in public schools. My child is a student at Wayne Community School District, and I love him being there, and I wouldn't choose anything different for him. But here's the deal. I can choose because I have the means. It's not about undermining the system that's serving our very own children. What good would come of us destroying those schools that are serving our children? Plain and simple, folks, this bill is about parental rights. It's just that simple. Parents have rights. And this bill tells us, this bill codifies some of those rights. They have the right to know what a school is teaching their child. They have the right to know who is teaching their children. They have a right to confirm the safety and well-being of their child, of their children, while they're in the custody of a school. They have every right to review any and all records and documents related to their children, whether that's created by the child himself or whether that's an assessment that's done by the teacher or other school staff. Additionally, they have the right to refuse to have their children participate in any curriculum or activity that they find offensive or harmful or that undermines their moral obligations to their kids. They have the right to ensure that their children are protected from sexually explicit conversations, materials, and instructions. Instruction that is not age appropriate to these young minds. They have the right to be allowed affirmative consent anytime any of this instruction or medical procedures are conducted by a school. Who would question these fundamental rights of parents? Who, Mr. President, would question these fundamental rights of parents? Certainly not our judicial system, which has ruled over and over and over again in support of a parent's right to direct the care, education, and upbringing of their child. Nearly 100 years ago, the court acknowledged that, quote, the child is not a mere creature of the state. Those who nurture him and direct his destiny have the right, coupled with the high duty, to recognize and prepare him for additional obligations. This was the case of Pierce v. Society of Sisters from 1925, and since then our courts have done nothing but uphold that. In a 1972 decision, Stanley v. Illinois, the court affirmed the fundamental rights of parents, quote, in the companionship, care, custody, and management of their children. That same year, in Wisconsin v. Yoder, the court declared that, quote, this primary role of the parents in the upbringing of their children is now established. Listen closely, it's established beyond debate as an enduring American tradition, end quote. And more recently, the court declared in Washington v. Glucksberg in 1997 that the Constitution, and specifically the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, protects the fundamental rights of parents to direct the care, upbringing, and education of their children. And in the aforementioned Troxel v. Granville case from 2000, the court again unequivocally affirmed the fundamental rights of parents to direct the care, custody, and control of their children. In Troxel, the court went further and stated, quote, so long as a parent adequately cares for his or her child, in other words, is fit, there will normally be no reason for the state to inject itself in the private realm of the family or to further question the ability of the parent to make the best decisions concerning the rearing of that parent's child. So when a school, which is indeed an extension of our government, fails to uphold these fundamental rights of parents to direct the education and moral upbringing of their own children, what recourse does a family have? What happens when the very institutions we've entrusted to care for our children instead violate the foundations that an individual family and a societal structure have been founded upon? What happens when a 14-year-old child is groomed by his teacher, such as was the case in Des Moines at Harding Middle School, where the teacher pled guilty in January of 2020 for attempting to coerce a child into sex? What happens when two teachers sexually exploit a child and fail to report that abuse to authorities, as also happened in 2019 here in Des Moines? I'm holding this up. I want you to see this. What happens when 86 individual children over the last 5 years are caught up, are approached, and have founded cases of sexual interaction with a teacher? 86 children in 5 years. What recourse do these parents have? 86 children. What happens when a child is raped by a fellow student and not allowed to open enroll? What happens when their IEP isn't fully implemented? Or a child is bullied, or a child is groomed, or they face violence and assault from other students? What happens then? What happens when a district's library and classrooms contain material that are inappropriate for the age of student and violate the parent's rights to direct the moral and educational upbringing of a child? I would like to read to you some of those materials. I would like for you to hear what is available to 12 and 13 and 14 and 15-year-old kids. I would like to do that, but I will not. Because sitting on the back row, we have children in this audience, and I would not do that. I would not undermine their parents' rights to direct their care and education and upbringing. What happens when the resources used in classrooms and available in libraries are offensive to the very moral fabric of a family and a child, such as those materials that I just spoke of? What happens when they invade the space that should be reserved for families to explore as part of their fundamental rights as Americans and affirmed over and over again by our judicial system? The answer to this question is simple. What's the answer? What recourse do they have? It's simple. We empower parents to make the educational choice for their children that best suits the needs of that child and the educational direction that that family deserves. The contents of this bill are what should happen when the institutions created by government oversteps the bounds of an individual family, and that family feels that their trust that they bestowed upon them for the child in their care has been violated. This bill is what should happen. Let me talk about it, just so there are no misconceptions about what you're voting on, because I heard a lot. First, there's accountability. This bill codifies that basic understanding of parents' rights as the sole arbiters of their child's education, and it ties it to a school's accreditation so that they will be dependent on their fidelity to that understanding. Second, the bill further outlines the fundamental rights of parents. It creates processes by which parents can access and request information related to their child's education, and it places a responsibility on schools to ensure that children have parental permission before they're ever exposed to some of that sexually charged content, whether in the classroom or in the library. Third, the bill creates a system of scholarships for children of low and moderate means to access alternative educational opportunities when their parents feel that the direction of their education needs to be changed. I will tell you, Mr. President, my colleague from Dallas, Senator Trone Garriott, asked who this bill was for. Let's talk about who this bill is for. This bill is this bill is for kids who have no other means to do this. This bill is, and I will just say that the initial, man, I'm going to get into history, and I don't know that I want to do that, but I want to share this. The very first modern-day school choice program began in Milwaukee The bill was passed in 1989, and the first voucher system was created for school year 1990. That voucher system has a 300% federal poverty level limitation on students who can participate in it, and 28,770 students in the Milwaukee system participate in that. Nearly 30,000 poor children in Milwaukee benefit from it. We're limiting it to 10,000 here in Iowa, but it's going to be the same poor children who need an opportunity that reflects their family's value and moral fiber. This system is similar to our longstanding system for post-secondary education that allows students to attend non-public universities with a public scholarship that's based on the students' and families' decision to further their educations. This system is almost identical in that it gives a scholarship to children who have chosen not to access our public university system. This scholarship program gives scholarships to children whose families have determined that the public system doesn't suit them best. And I would like to clear up some misinformation about the bill so we know what the bill actually does related to rural schools. And my colleague, Mr. President, my colleague from Johnson County, Senator Kinney, whom I have nothing but respect, talked about that 500 student limit. That isn't in this bill. Why not? Because we knew it didn't effectively seek out the support that rural schools might need if this transition occurs. We knew it didn't effectively meet the needs of all rural schools. And so we replaced it with a system that expanded and opened up and increased the participation for our shared operational function system, which is set to sunset within 3 years. We've extended that out to 2035. And just in case, Mr. President, you don't understand how many districts are affected by this, 78.3% of districts in the state of Iowa utilize shared operational functions to be more effective in the management of their schools. And if we don't pass this, we eliminate a funding stream that allows them to do that. Furthermore, this bill is what Iowans want. It was said Iowans don't want this, nobody wants this. It was said there's not a single superintendent in the state of Iowa who wants this. I guarantee you there are at least two, because they proactively reached out to me. One said to me, and I don't have the email in front of me, I didn't realize I was gonna have to answer this. One said to me, "Senator, I am so proud of you for sticking up for students whose needs are not being met in the public system." And another said, "I don't care if this passes, I've got a great school." I didn't reach out to them about it because I know by and large they're not supporters. They sought me out to tell me I was doing the right thing. This is what Iowans want. In a 12-month rolling average poll updated just February, Morning Consult's Iowa poll indicates that 60% of Iowa adults and 76% of adults with school-aged children support these scholarships. That same poll indicates that 36% of parents would choose non-public schooling for their children if cost were not an issue. Another poll conducted in 2021, so a year ago, indicated not that 36% of parents would choose non-public, but that 43% of parents would choose private schooling for their children as compared to only 8% who actually attend if cost were not a factor. Iowans want this. There are those who would tell you, Mr. President, there are those who would tell you that public money should only be used for public purposes, just like we heard tonight. But if that's the arbiter in this conversation, what about all the other public dollars being used for private purposes? Mr. President, would you dream of telling a young mother whose child is on Medicaid that she can only take her daughter to the free walk-in clinic and not to Blank Children's Hospital to be treated for cancer? Would you dream of telling her that? Would we ever consider telling that single dad who's utilizing SNAP to feed his kiddos that he can only take those dollars to Hy-Vee or to Fairway, but not to his local grocery store? Would we dream of directing where he's using public dollars for his private purpose? Would we dream of doing that? I wouldn't. Would we dare tell the brilliant Pell Grant or Iowa tuition grant recipient that she could only go to the University of Iowa, because that's the one that's the public system, and not to Central College to gain her degree, because public dollars shouldn't go for private purposes? Will you dare to tell that young lady that? I won't. Folks, this isn't a public money versus private programs issue. This is, in fact, taxpayer dollars. Money that's come out of my paycheck and your paycheck. Taxpayer dollars set aside for the purpose of educating children to be productive members of our society. The public good is the education of the child. Sustaining a system that may not be accomplishing that is not the ultimate goal nor the ultimate public good. I could go on and on and on about the public dollars and private functions. We could talk about our preschool system that partners with non-public religious institutions that moms and dads choose to have their kids go to on the public dime. We could talk about Section 8 housing or Social Security. We could go on and on and on about all of the public dollars that are going into private purposes and private institutions. Why is this one public institution the sacred cow that can't be breached? Why? If the public good, the ultimate public purpose, isn't being served with our tax dollars, why on earth would we not find another way to accomplish the same goal as we have over and over and over again in the history of our great nation? Others will tell you the school choice is bad because non-public schools are not accountable. Mr. President, as my colleague from Woodbury, Senator Smith, said, they don't have the same requirements. That is a straw man. Every single school that's eligible to accept a student who is receiving one of these scholarships has gone through a rigorous accreditation process, including student testing. They are held to the same standards as public schools for student health and safety. They also meet the strict demands of their own parental governing bodies in much the same way that public schools meet the demands of their school boards. There is accountability, and it is strict accountability, and to say otherwise is false. Some might tell you that these scholarships only benefit the rich, or that Iowa already has choice, but that parents should have to pay for the choice, but they should have to pay for it if they want it. If they want something other than the public system, well, pay for it. You can do that. Nobody's stopping you. Nobody's stopping you. In fact, not so long ago, a colleague of ours posted on social media that choice is already available, parents just have to pay for it. Well, you know, that mind frame is elitist at best. Let them eat cake, right? That mind frame is elitist at best, and it's borderline racist and classist at worst. Those who can afford choice, those who have the means and the desire to send their child to non-public schools, do you know what? They're already doing it. This bill does not target them. Parents who can cover the cost of tuition and transportation, they're already there. It's the poor among us who have no choice. And for this body to deny the choice of education for any child based on the ability of their parents to pay, that should be considered criminal. I'm going to read some things to you. I had to get my glasses out. I apologize. I am getting old. But I just want to read some direct stories to you. From the Holy Family Catholic School, many of our families struggle to make ends meet while providing a faith-based, state-accredited education to their children. We've seen our parents cash in part of their retirement plans or work extra jobs simply to continue to meet their obligations in addition to paying for the quality of education they desire for their child. Regardless of race, socioeconomic status, neighborhood, or profession, no family should be brought to the brink of bankruptcy, nor should any parent be subjected to utter exhaustion due to providing an education while continuing to be a productive member of society. A family in Davenport with 3 children needed options and struggled to find them. Their oldest son was badly bullied in the public high school and struggled academically, and he just had to endure it because they had no options. When it was time for their younger daughters to attend high school, they went to the local Catholic high school to see if they could enroll there because they wanted them to have a better experience than their son had. The daughters were enrolled and received assistance through the STO program, but there wasn't nearly enough funding to cover all their tuition and costs. Their father was disabled, so could only work one low-paying job. Their mother worked 3 jobs to cover the costs. The girls were behind academically when they arrived at school, but soon they caught up and excelled. They participated in athletics for the first time ever. Abby, in Cedar Valley Catholic Schools, Abby is a single mother of 5 students. She's unable to hold steady jobs. There is not a father in the picture for any of the kids. They have 2 different fathers. And the youngest 2 had been physically abused by their biological father, who's now incarcerated. All 5 kids have been in the school system since their preschool years. The oldest student was able to graduate on time from Columbus High School. The next oldest is a senior this year and pays her own tuition. Listen to that. A senior in high school, listen, is paying her own tuition so she has a better opportunity. Students 3 and 4 had to withdraw from CVCS this year because mom, out of a job again, was unable to pay the previous year's tuition, even with an 80% STO award. The youngest child was able to return to St. Edmunds Elementary School mid-year, but only because of generous donations from people who stepped forward to pay his tuition. I'm dragging on. I don't care. This matters. We had a family from the Republic of Congo. If we want to talk about advancing opportunities for minorities, for people who are downtrodden, let's talk about a family from Congo. Spoke little English. They came to inquire regarding attendance for their freshman boy this school year last July. We met with them numerous times, setting up translators for the dad. In talking through tuition for them, we explained STO and that in future years they'd need to apply to receive financial assistance. The family of 4 literally had nothing, living in a 1-bedroom apartment. Dad drove to Waterloo to work the 3rd shift so that he could get home to take his boys to St. Jude's. He greatly desired to continue the Catholic education for his 9th grade boy, and he did not want him to attend the local public high school to which he was assigned. After numerous meetings and filling out all the necessary paperwork, they declined to officially register, and we're fairly certain it had to do with the cost of Xavier, as the dad seemed daunted by the fact not only would he have to find a way to pay for his boy to attend this year, but his siblings in future years. This one struck me. Most families are just looking for a high-quality education, but feel it's not within their budget. I went to Cathedral's noon Spanish Mass last Sunday to talk to families. The parish was counting attendance, and it was over 1,600 people at that Mass. Only 2 families talked to me. Everyone else went by me and said, "Cueste muy caro," too expensive for me. One family said this: "The reality of it is that our income is the same, and we have 2 children in college that still depend on us financially, even though they aren't considered our dependents. We are heartbroken that our 2 younger children won't get the opportunity that our 2 older children got by attending Dowling." Those are real families. Those are real families who don't have a choice. But hey, if we're going to listen to our colleagues, they should just pay for it if they want choice. Well, I guess it's pay for that or pay for rent, right? I've also been told that this bill is an assault on teachers. Ladies and gentlemen, no. The entire aim of this bill is to connect and empower teachers and parents, both public and non-public, so that all children can ultimately succeed. And we were told that there's a workforce shortage, that teachers are fleeing the state because of this assault on them. Let me get my facts. I don't want to say it wrong. I don't know if any of you know this, but from 1993 to 2020, we've had a 41% increase in workforce within our schools. 24% of that has been classroom teachers. Any guesses on the student population increase? 11. We have more teachers outpacing the number of the growth of student population, more staff members on whole outpacing by far the growth of student population. There aren't people fleeing the state. We're hiring more and more and more to serve fewer students. I could talk with you all about the research, but Brad did that for me, so I will skip that part. I'll give you a break there. But what I don't want to do is skip out on sharing the history. I was told tonight, Mr. President, I was told tonight that this is a partisan issue, that no Democrats want this, that only Republicans are trying to force this down people's throats, and nobody actually wants this. It is not a partisan issue. I will give you the history lesson you all need. Modern school choice began in Milwaukee in 1989. It began as a voucher system that was spearheaded for a couple of decades before that by a gentleman whose name is Dr. Howard Fuller. Does that ring any bells with anyone? He was a civil rights activist. The legislator who spearheaded the Milwaukee voucher system that I mentioned has nearly 30,000 students. The legislator who spearheaded that was not a Republican. Fuller's proposal for an all-black school gained traction, but the Wisconsin legislators opted instead for a voucher plan in 1989, the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program. The program covered the tuition of students who wanted to enroll in private students. And as I said, their guidelines were 300% federal poverty level. Representative Annette Polly Williams was the black Democrat who worked with Fuller to get this legislation through. And I want to tell you what she said. A black Democrat legislator working with a black civil rights activist began the first voucher system in the modern voucher system in the United States, and she said, if you are drowning and a hand is extended to you, you don't ask if the hand is attached to a Republican or a Democrat. You do the right thing. Polly told us you do the right thing. Howard Fuller said this. If you're curious about this being a partisan issue, Dr. Fuller said this: I've always seen school choice from a social justice framework. Mr. President, colleagues, I value Iowa's strong history of educational success. I wholeheartedly support the men and women who've dedicated their lives to improving the lives of children through our public education system as well as our non-public schools. But there is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to student success, and only parents should be the ones to have the opportunity to determine their child's educational future. And they have the absolute right to decide that course as Americans. Mr. President, I move Senate File 2369 as amended be read for the final time and placed on its passage.